This is Dennis Callan in Avignon. This is one of the most beautiful cities in France. It's loaded with historic monuments, especially the great Palace of the Popes. At a certain time in the 14th century, Avignon became the home to the popes. They left the Vatican in Rome and relocated to Avignon. And this was the golden period of the city when the great palaces were built, great mansions were built. A wall was built around the town at that time in the 14th century. And the wall still stands today, as do all of the great palaces. The Palace of the Pope especially is considered the largest Gothic palace in all of Europe. So it's definitely a must-see when you come to Avignon. And also the little back streets are certainly part of the charm, like you find in any great European town. They're going to be cobblestone lanes and lined with shops, a lot of trees and benches you can sit down and rest, cafes always. And we're going to take you on a tour of the main highlights as well as some of those little back streets of the great city of Avignon. Home to 9 popes during the 14th century and one of the most beautiful cities in France today, Avignon is a treasure house of palaces, museums, and meandering lanes, surrounded by an old fortified wall that still protects it from modernization. That's one of the beauties of a walled town in Europe. Not only did it protect the town from bandits and invaders during the Middle Ages, but in the 20th and 21st centuries, it's continued protecting these historic centers from modernization. And so within the wall of Avignon, you have a nicely preserved old town, and yet at the same time, modern shops that are quite up to date and very hip people. Avignon lies on the left bank of the River Rhône at the foot of a rock that's 190 feet high, on whose south slope are the old Palace of the Popes and the cathedral. Avignon became a thriving colony under the Romans, but retains hardly a trace of their buildings. Its greatest period was from 1309 to 1377, during which time it was the residence of several popes from Clement V to Gregory XI, and had a population at that time of 80,000, making it a very large city. Papal nuncios resided here down to 1791, although the Great Schism of the mid-14th century was resolved by 1377 when the popes returned to Rome. Avignon was next to France in the late 18th century. The medieval wall, or the ramparts, are 3 miles in length and were built in 1350 to 1368 by Pope Innocent VI and Pope Urban V. They were altered in 1489, and they have since been restored. They present a very interesting example of medieval fortification. There were once 10 gates, but several have been demolished, leaving just a few gates remaining for us to enter through today. There are 39 towers and battlements along the walls. The best preserved part of the walls is near the Porte Saint-Lazare. This city, in the heart of beautiful Provence, lays claim to dozens of historic monuments, especially the great Palace of the Popes, which was gradually enlarged into an imposing fortification during the 60-year papal residency, where you had those 9 different popes living here. And it's now a museum open to the public. Begin your orientation of Avignon with a look at the 2 main squares in the center of town, the Place de l'Horloge, surrounded by cafes and bistros, and the adjacent Place du Palais, containing the city's most important and historic structure, the Palace of the Popes. This UNESCO World Heritage Site is considered the largest Gothic palace in all of Europe, and a priority place to see in Avignon, although its original furniture is gone and the cavernous rooms are mostly empty. The popes left the Vatican in Rome for political reasons and lived in Avignon from 1316 until 1377. the city's golden period during which great mansions were built, money flowed in, the wall was constructed around the town for protection. This was a time of wild growth with massive wealth coming in via the church, some from every manner of rowdy foreigners who could pay their way into the city, much like the modern invasion of tourists. There's also a wine shop inside the palace, and if you choose not to pay admission to go to see the palace, by all means go into the wine shop and the gift shop because their admission is free, and sometimes they have selected wine tastings in the wine bar, and it's a very good place to purchase wine. And while you're in the wine bar and gift shop, you have access to several of the very large rooms inside the palace on your way to use the toilet facilities. So by all means, take advantage. One of the most spectacular rooms that you can see inside the palace is the Hall of the Audience, with its Gothic vaulting and massive stone pillars. This large room could hold as many as 600 people. It's one of the reasons why the Palace of the Popes is in the top 10 places in all of France for the visitor, with nearly 700,000 visitors per year. The Palace of the Popes, with its massive battlements and lofty walls 13 feet thick, is more of a castle than a palace. It was built on various plans in 1335 through 1365. And when you go out the back door of the palace, you'll end up in the old neighborhood where ancient Romans first established their town 2,000 years ago. That's right, Avignon was founded by the Romans, as were many of the great cities of Europe. Notice the simple Roman ruins on the right side of the small square. And that's about all that's left in Avignon from the ancient Roman structures. Greeks were at this site before the Romans, and simpler prehistoric tribes, of course, lived here even earlier.